Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a crisis that's brewing right now in the Caribbean, one that could seriously send shockwaves through the entire global economy. We're going to break down this high-stakes standoff between the United States and Venezuela and what it all means for the price of oil, for your wallet, and really for the future of global conflict.
So let's jump right in with this quote from geopolitical analyst Yanis Varoufakis, because it really sets the stage. What he's saying is that what's happening just off the coast of South America, it's not just some regional squabble. Nope, it's a sign of a massive, fundamental shift in who holds power in the world.
And to really get a sense of the stakes here, we have to start with this number, 15,000. That's roughly how many U.S. military personnel are deployed right now on a fleet of warships near Venezuelan waters. Let's be clear, this is not a drill. This is a huge military posture.
All right, so to really understand what's going on, we're going to unpack this whole thing in 6 parts. We'll start with the military buildup and the economic weapons being thrown around, then the shockwaves hitting global oil. After that, we'll look at the great power game, with Russia and China, then the 3 most likely endgames, and finally, what this all means for the future.
Okay, first up, the military reality on the ground, or I guess on the water. What's happening there is really setting the stage for everything else.
So, the U.S. has moved its biggest and newest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, into position, along with a full strike group, and that includes a Marine unit that's perfectly capable of landing on shore. When you combine that with the announcement of an airspace closure, well, this isn't just a show of force. It's basically a blockade, and it seems designed for one thing: economic strangulation.
But don't think Venezuela is just sitting back and taking this. With some serious backing from Russia, it's got advanced fighter jets, anti-ship missiles, and pretty modern air defense systems. The message they're sending is crystal clear. They are trying to make the cost of any direct attack astronomically high. They're signaling that a U.S. aircraft carrier worth over $13 billion could be a target.
Now for Section 2. You see, this fight isn't just happening with warships, it's also being fought with incredibly powerful economic weapons, turning the world of finance itself into a battlefield. This is where it gets really interesting. The U.S. used a legal tool as a weapon. They've designated key Venezuelan officials as part of the Cartel de los Soles, which means Cartel of the Suns, a nod to the star insignias on their generals' uniforms. By labeling them a foreign terrorist organization, the U.S. has effectively made it a crime for anyone to do business with the entire country. Any company, anywhere in the world, that trades with Venezuela now risks getting prosecuted under U.S. law.
And here you can see the result of years of this kind of pressure, plus, of course, their own internal crisis. Venezuela's economy has shrunk by an absolutely staggering 75% in the last decade. I mean, that's a level of economic collapse you almost never see outside of a full-blown catastrophic war.
And behind those staggering economic numbers is a truly devastating human cost. Over 7.7 million people have fled Venezuela since 2014. Just to put that into perspective, that's more than a quarter of the country's entire population. It has created the single largest refugee crisis in the history of the Western Hemisphere.
Okay, so that brings us to the global oil shockwave. Because this regional crisis is sending some serious tremors through an energy market that's, well, it's already on a knife's edge.
So here's the great paradox of this whole situation. Venezuela is sitting on more proven oil reserves than Saudi Arabia. It's incredible. And yet, its production has totally collapsed, down by 80%. And with the U.S. recently pushing out Chevron, which was the last major company kind of holding the infrastructure together, that production is probably going to fall even more.
Now, why does this matter to the rest of us? Well, look at this number. The world's spare oil production capacity, that's the emergency buffer we have, is down to just 3%. That is a razor-thin margin. It means the global market is super vulnerable to any kind of supply disruption, and losing even more Venezuelan oil would be a massive shock to the system.
And this shows you the direct line from that conflict in the Caribbean straight to your wallet. It's simple, really. If Venezuelan supply gets choked off, analysts are predicting that crude oil could spike to $140 a barrel. And for you and me, that could easily mean gas prices surging past $5 a gallon at the pump.
But this isn't just a two-player game. Not at all. This whole crisis is a chessboard, and other global powers, I'm talking about Russia and China, are making their own strategic moves.
For Russia, Venezuela is a hugely important strategic asset. By propping up the Maduro government, Moscow gets to tie down American military resources far away from Europe.
It creates a bargaining chip for any talks about Ukraine, and it positions Russia to sell even more of its own oil to Asia if Venezuela's supply gets cut. It's a win-win-win for them.
China, on the other hand, is in a really tough spot. It's been buying up tons of heavily discounted oil from Venezuela. So now it has a brutal choice. Either find new suppliers and accept much higher energy costs, or keep buying from Venezuela and risk getting hit with massive 25% U.S. tariffs on its exports. And all the while, this crisis gives Beijing a perfect opportunity to push for more oil trade in its own currency, which directly challenges the U.S. dollar.
So, with all these pieces moving on the board, where does this all lead? Well, Yanis Varoufakis lays out 3 potential endgames for this whole crisis, and each one has wildly different consequences for the rest of the world.
This table breaks it down perfectly. On one end, you've got Scenario 1, a successful U.S.-backed regime change. That would probably lead to a drop in oil prices. On the complete other end is Scenario 3, a catastrophic military escalation, a real war. That could send oil prices flying up to $200 a barrel and crater global growth. And then there's the one in the middle, Scenario 2, a frozen conflict, where we see sustained high prices and a big push for countries to move away from the U.S. dollar.
So which one is the most likely? According to Varoufakis, it's that middle path, the frozen conflict. And why? Well, it's pretty simple, really. Neither side actually wants a full-scale war. That would be devastating for everyone. But at the same time, neither side can afford the political fallout of backing down. So, that points to a long, grinding, painful economic siege. Okay, for our last section, let's just zoom out for a second and think about the broader lesson here. What is this crisis teaching us about the future of global conflict in the 21st century?
You know, the really big takeaway is this. We are living through an era where economic policy and military strategy are becoming the exact same thing. That old idea, the one from after the Cold War, that connecting our economies would prevent conflict, well, that's been completely flipped on its head. Instead, those very connections have become the new weapons.
And that leaves all of us with a really critical and, frankly, kind of scary question. We are watching the rules of the entire global system get rewritten right in front of us, not through quiet diplomacy, but through open confrontation. So as our economies become the new battlefields, how will any of us, nations or individuals, navigate the incredible risks that are surely to come?